Irniq, thank you very much. I want to first introduce my who I call my co-president of my household, Marie Irniq. And she's and I are great partners. We do a lot of work together on issues relating to Inuit, because I know a lot of my Inuit issues, but she sometimes criticizes me for saying it the wrong way in English. So I try to make sure that I speak clearly, as I was told at the residential school, and you are here to learn to speak and write English and add arithmetic. So let me first of all just recognize my friend from long time ago, colleague Sally Webster. Thank you for being here. And I want to start off with this statement. When I was forcibly taken by the Roman Catholic priest, when I was forcibly kidnapped in broad daylight by a Roman Catholic priest right in front of my parents in August of 1958. The boat was coming up from the direction of Nauyat, Repulse Bay. And as usual, because we were going to be receiving visitors at that point, my mother started to making tea by boiling heather outside, which is the traditional way of boiling hot water, boiling meat and fish and things like that. So when the boat beached, there was about 4 or 5 men. And then Roman Catholic priest, he came off first, and he said in Inuktitut to my father, Irniq, Peter Irniq, Ayavut. Translation: Peter Irniq is going to go to school in Chesterfield Inlet, so we came here to get him. And then he hosted me into the boat, and I was on my way to Nauyat, Repulse Bay, leaving my parents for the first time. That was around August 22, 23 in 1958. That morning, that afternoon actually, I left as a total Eskimo, Inuk, wearing sealskin boots, Inuit clothing. The next day, we took off to Igloolikaagluk, Chesterfield Inlet, to go to residential school. That same day, 2 days after I left as an Eskimo Inuk, I became a white man, white boy, the very next day. I was dressed like a European. Immediately, I was taught to think and talk like the European by the Grey Nuns, by the Roman Catholic Church, as well as the teachers who were, most of them were, actually all of them were Roman Catholic teachers. So you have to go through that visit of that particular forceful departure from your parents. It was a permanent departure. I never was the same person after I had returned to go back to my community, as we had traumatic experience when we went to a residential school. We had a loss of culture. We had a loss of language, Inuit language. We had a loss of Inuit spirituality, and we had a loss of Inuit shamanism, and most of all, we had a loss of parenting skills. These losses were permanent. We were never going to get them back again up to this particular day. We are still Inuit. We are still Inuit. We will never stop being Inuit. When we were at the residential school, we were taught in English only. we were told never to speak our language in the classroom. When I was caught in September of 1958, speaking Inuktitut to my fellow Inuk in the classroom, and one Sister Chaput, Teresa Chaput, who was a Roman Catholic teacher, she was also a school principal, caught me speaking Inuktitut to late Marius Kayutak. She motioned me to come down. She took a yardstick, she had me face the class like this, and she said, "Don't ever let me hear you speak that language again in this classroom." And she hit me so hard on the palm of my hand. That's the pain I feel today. I still feel it. It will never, never go away. Now, you hear speakers from various First Nations and other Inuit who spoke about having been sexually abused. We are all survivors of sexual abuse by the Grey Nuns, the men of the white cloth, the brothers, and the priests at the residential school. We are all survivors of sexual abuse. When they sexually abused you, they told you never, never tell anybody. If you tell somebody, you are going to be in trouble. The thing was, who do you tell? As an 11-year-old boy, who do you tell? Your childhood was taken away by a Grey Nun in my case. Her name was Sister Gerard. Maybe she's in the files here at the St. Paul University. Brother Perrin, maybe he's here. I know he's here in the files at the St. Paul University because I've seen them. So who do you tell? If you tell somebody, who is going to believe you? I have never told my parents of this horrible, horrific, committed by the Roman Catholics, brothers and Grey Nuns to my parents. They would not have believed me if I had told them. If I had told anybody, I would have been in trouble and sent back to my home community of Nauyat, Repulse Bay at that time. So today, we take a journey of healing from the loss of language, from the loss of Inuit culture, from the loss of Inuit parenting skills, Inuit spirituality, and Inuit shamanism. We were not allowed to speak our language. We were not allowed to practice our Inuit culture. We were not allowed to go out and hunt. Up to the time that I was taken away from my home, which was an outpost camp, about 12 miles away from the little village of Nauyat, I left home as a complete Inuk. The whole idea of residential school for Inuit, as it was for First Nations, was to assimilate Inuit into becoming Europeans. Little white boys and little white girls. That was the whole idea of the residential school. We were never to be the same people again after we got home from the residential school. Never again. Colonialism, Canadian government's colonialism. Let me say a couple of political topics here. Remember Stephen Harper, that guy? He said, pardon me?
May he rest in peace.
Gee. There's two things happen in my lifetime with regard to the residential school. We had an apology from the Roman Catholic Bishop, Renaud Rouleau, on February 27 in 1996 in Igloolik, in which we wrote the apology for the bishop. And he said, we had him say this, "You were too young when we forcibly took you away. Things that happened to you, such as sexual abuse, loss of culture, loss of language, loss of Inuit spirituality, and loss of Inuit shamanism, and loss of parenting skills, those things shouldn't have happened to you. For this, we apologize." we wrote the apology for the bishop because he did not know how to make an apology for a Roman Catholic bishop for the Hudson's Bay Diocese of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, it was time for Stephen Harper. On June 3, 2008, I was asked to be one of 4 people to help the Prime Minister to write the apology for the Prime Minister. So there were 2 First Nation people, one Métis and myself, who was helping the Prime Minister to make an apology. We wrote the apology for him. We worded things like, we were forcibly taken away from our parents. We were severely punished. That was my own line. And the reason why I said that, maybe it was okay to hit people at the Roman Catholic Church institution or any classroom in Canada in 1958 or 1959. Maybe it was okay to do that at that time. There was a teacher named George DeMille. He must be about 75 or 80 years old today. He used to pick up little girls. I remember he picked up Bernadette Amariak, picked her up, threw her against the wall, punishing her for not being able to add arithmetic, spelling in English, and speaking in English. Well, first of all, Bernadette was about my age. He was 11 years old at that time. She did not know how to speak English. So for not being able to speak English and add arithmetic and spell, she got a severe punishment by this guy, George DeMille. When George DeMille got so angry at a class like this, he would take a chalk and he would throw it against one of the students in the classroom. Sometimes it landed on your face, sometimes it landed on your front. And he would say, "You're a bunch of hounds of iniquities. No good for nothing, bloody dodos." That's what he used to call us at the residential school. I did not know what bloody dodo was. So Marie and I went to Perth, Australia, when I was Commissioner of Nunavut in 2003. We stayed at a place called Saville Hotel at Perth, Australia. I said to Marie the next morning, I want to go have some coffee. And the restaurant was called Dodo restaurant. So I looked it up in the dictionary and finally found out that I'm a dumb bird. Not bad. So I said to the Prime Minister on June 3, 2008, I said, "Prime Minister, how would you feel if you find out when you get home today that your 2 children had been taken away by the RCMP forcibly from your home and you don't know where they went?" That's how he finally understood exactly how we were taken away forcibly by the church and the Canadian government in the 1950s and 60s. So, you know, for a long period of time, I had been, along with people like my friend Jack Annawa, who is also my cousin, along with my late friend Mary Stungilik, who also is from Nauyat, Repulse Bay. We opened up this issue of residential school healing journey in Nunavut. Nunavut means our land in my language, for those of you who may not know what it means. And for those of you who may not know what it means about Nauyat, it means seagull fledglings, which is where we're moving back to take back our culture, to retrieve, to take back our culture and language and retrieve and reclaim. So we decided in 1990 to move the residential school healing journey for a lot of people. I knew at that time, well, the 3 of us knew at that time, that we would get a lot of criticism from people. First of all, from the Roman Catholic Church. Secondly, from the Canadian government, from Inuit and non-Inuit. You know, you got well educated, you were well fed, you were well clothed, which is a whole lot of bullshit anyway. So we were not well fed. They fed us frozen fish. They cooked frozen fish with guts in it. Can you eat bass with guts in it? No, you can't. It's horrible. They used to clothe us with southern-made, factory-made clothing. And a couple of times they sent us out trapping at -40 or -50. Lucky, you know, as 11-year-olds, there was no polar bears around. Otherwise, we would have been attacked by a polar bear and eaten by a polar bear. So all of these years, we worked together with our fellow Inuit, politicians, and yes, clergy, community leaders, caregivers, historians. We worked together in moving the residential school experience because we knew from our own experiences, even though we were always criticized, remember, they criticized us a heck of a lot, but we also wanted to make sure that there were people who were in pain and they wanted to heal. They wanted to reconcile from their experiences. They wanted to be Inuit again. They wanted to practice their own culture, their own language, their own parenting skills, Inuit spirituality and Inuit shamanism. There were so many people in pain who wanted to do all this. So we continued going. So July 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we had a reunion of the former students, survivors of the residential school in Igloolikautik, Chesterfield Inlet. And we talked about the pain. And we talked about our hopes and aspirations for our people. We talked about what we wanted to do to take back our culture, to take back our language and our Inuit spirituality and shamanism and Inuit parenting skill. Well, at that place, Bishop apologized, which I referred to as a half-ass apology, because he said, you know, some of you, your memory is foggy. Well, to tell the Inuit, Inuit that statement, Inuit never forget. Inuit never, never, never forget. And the reason why we never forget is because we have what we call Inuit Kauyi Mayatokangit, Inuit traditional knowledge. We never had a writing system. And that's why we're so good at remembering of what happened to us at the residential school at a very young age. Some kids were taken away at the age of 4 years old. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We were forcibly taken away from our parents by the Roman Catholic priest, put on the canoe and put on a single-engine plane. In Nauyat, Repulse Bay in 1958, we only had about 5 buildings. 3 belonged to the Hudson Bay Company, and 2 belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. Other people had other churches too. Anglican Church had their own residential school. United Church did not have any responsibility for Inuit in the 1950s and 60s. So the rest of us were always living in an igloo. In the wintertime, pakmak, which is a sod house in the winter, and tents in the summertime, traveling by dog team in the wintertime, walking the land in search of caribou and fish in the summertime. So my story, my teachings, whether here at the St. Paul University this morning, is I talk about moving from igloo to microwave in less than 50 years. Or another way of putting that is from igloo to microwave, or igloo to internet, dog team to internet in less than 50 years. So that's what we talk about. So moving on from the residential school reunion, we decided to write Bishop's Apology. He delivered it, as I said, February 27, 1996 in Iqaluit. Prime Minister delivered his June 11, 2008. And I drum danced, as you said, I'm a drum dance teacher. Drum dance is always a celebration of life. So I drum danced for the national Canadian people in the name of healing and reconciliation of people. Remember, Stephen Harper said 3 months later in Pittsburgh, United States, Canada has no history of colonialism. Well, the man has to learn his history. The man has to learn about Canada. Did he not consider dog slaughter by the RCMP part of colonialism? What did he think residential school was? What did he think the forced relocations from the land to the settlement, quote unquote, was? What did he think that we were moved into from snow house to a wooden house in the 1960s? What did he think, most of all, that Canadian government in 1941 established disc numbers, we call dog tags, for Eskimos, because the Government of Canada administrator, he went up to the Arctic and he came back to Ottawa and said, those Eskimo names are too hard to pronounce, so we got to come up with a better system. So they established a disc number for Inuit. If you live in the Western Northwest Territories, Tuktoyaktok, Inuvik, and so on, your number started with W1, W2, W3, and so you with a number attached to it. W stood for West. And then if you live in the Eastern Arctic from Johaven on to the east, your number started with E1, E2, and they came to now at E3. My number was E3546. I always had this name, Irniq. My parents named me Irniq, which means son, S-O-N. And there was absolutely no concern about Inuit names. So my name for the longest time at the residential school was Peter E3546. And that was the only identification. It had a particular identification, Eskimo identification, and your number attached to it. So we did something about these things to undo colonialism. Residential school for one. We had a surname project in 1970 in which we established a surname project for every Inuk living in the Northwest Territories. So everybody has today a surname. That's colonialism, undoing colonialism. So residential school, you have to go there every time you want to speak about, you want to talk about Inuit life. You have to visit that residential school no matter what. You can never get away from it. So I go down here. I said to my wife as we were walking in the hallway, oh, Jesus, residential school here. I saw some pictures of the Grey Nuns and Oblate priests. That's residential school. It touches your heart. You have to visit wherever you go. Residential school. You talk about the colonialism of the Canadian government. That's colonialism that you're reminded of. You're not allowed to speak your own language. My friend, who is running for a New Democratic Party, Jack Anawa, when he was a previously member of Parliament in 1990s, he spoke in the House of Commons in Inuktitut. I don't know exactly when it was, but he spoke in the House of Commons in Inuktitut. So the Bloc Québécois, he got guts. Jesus. He got guts and he said, point of order, Mr. Speaker. I don't understand that. I don't recognize that foreign language. So Jack, being pretty smart, well, let's talk about foreign language. English is the foreign language in Canada. French language is a foreign language in Canada. Well, let's get things into proper perspective, eh? So, pardon me? Right on. So let's do that. That's part of healing and reconciliation. That's part of healing and reconciliation. I heard Tony, when he was talking here earlier, mention taking back traditional place names is healing and reconciliation. It is. We're doing that in Nunavut as they do in the Northwest Territories now. Taking back, reclaiming, retrieving my culture, our culture, is healing and reconciliation. Talking about your pain is healing, and it is also a reconciliation. So Nauyat is one of the places where I helped to get that community a year ago to take back their culture, to take back their language, to take back the meaning of life, Inuit life, traditional knowledge. We did it for Iqaluit. Iqaluit, 25 years ago already, roughly. And Mayor, whose name was Andy Theriot at that time, he was asked, why did you go back to that name from Frobisher Bay? A practically good name. He made history here for the people of the Eastern Arctic. And he said, well, you know, Martin Frobisher was a crook. You know what? I agree with Andy. So that's what we're doing. We got rid of disc numbers. Every Inuk has an Inuit name now, and our Inuit names always mean something. So every Inuk has a name. That's reconciliation, that's healing from the past of what happened. Hey, look, we are teaching in Nunavut, as they do in the Northwest Territories, and it's something if you're associated with the university here at St. Paul, you should consider telling the president, the dean, whoever. Follow the example of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, and also Manitoba. We're now teaching residential school experience at high school level. That's a good news story. Yeah. Which always brings me about the fact that every school in Canada should be learning more about Aboriginal Inuit issues, Inuit culture, Inuit language, Inuit Kauyamaya in every classroom in Canada. Yeah. That's healing, that's reconciliation with Canadians. Because I have always said, over the course of 25 years now, Canadians have a right, have a duty, have a responsibility, moral obligation to know of what happened to us at the residential school. It's a must. Louis Ukaluk will know what I'm talking about when I say this next statement. By the way, I didn't read my notes that I was going to read this one. I thought, what comes here is better than the notes that I had. In Halifax, 5 years ago, we had a national event at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we had these private hearings with health workers, health healers. So I talked about mine. I talked about my healing journey from the time that I was taken away. You see, I was growing up to be a good hunter, a good family provider, so that we had caribou clothing. We had sealskin boots. We had dogs, Inuit dogs, to travel with. So that's how I was growing up to be when I was a young boy. And my father was a great teacher of Inuit culture, and he said to me a few times, and to other people, if you don't know how to build an igloo, you cannot get married. True. Kind of like saying, if you don't have a job, how are you going to support your family? So it's the same kind of idea. So I made my statement that day from the time that I was taken away from home. I could still see my parents, my brother-in-law and my sister, my little brother. He was standing on the beach, on the shore, when I was taken away in August of 1958. I could still see them standing there, and they stood there until the boat that I was on disappeared in the horizon. So what did that mean for me? I also watched my parents disappeared on the beach. I watched them until I could no longer see them on my way to Nunavut in August of 1958. So today, I have fought to make sure that our parents were also recognized as part of the Prime Minister's apology of June 11, 2008, because they suffered greatly, if not more than we did. Inuit are the most patient people in the world. We are patient and we survive. So it has always been great for me to be able to put a voice to my parents, who were voiceless and who were powerless when we were taken away from our parents to go to a residential school. So that morning, I was providing my own private statement to a health support. I started out with the story like that. I finished mine with the story, which is how I'm going to end it today. I said in Halifax, when I was asked to say the traditional prayer that morning to the national event in Halifax. So I said that morning, you know, I came into that room as a little boy. I came out of there as a man. You remember that? I thought that could make things very, very powerful. You talk about your childhood. You borrow a good time from your past. You borrow that good time from your past and you promote it to the future, your children and your grandchildren. That is also healing and reconciliation with your family and your children as well as your grandchildren. So the journey we have taken is a long one. It's a long journey. What did this do for us? You as Canadians, whether you live in British Columbia, whether you live in Saskatchewan, whether you live in Manitoba, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Nunavik. Whether you live in Vatican, whether you live in the United States, whether you live in Europe, you have an opportunity, the living history of people who struggled, who made things better, who moved on to make things better. Nunavut has been a reconciliation for us Inuit. Nunavut has been a healing journey for Inuit. Hey, look, we have taken back our culture, we have taken back our language, we have taken back our Inuit Kawiyamayatuhangit, which is what you should be pronouncing now. Inuit Kawiyamayatuhangit means Inuit traditional knowledge. As a result of the creation of Nunavut, we have majority of our members of the Legislative Assembly are Inuit. They can speak Inuktitut as much as they want. We can dress in Inuktitut like the amauti that Sally had earlier to carry the baby. We have an Inuit official languages commissioner. She's a young woman. She's about 40, 45 years old. Her name is Sandra Inuta. And we're now teaching what we've lost in the classroom in Chesterfield Inlet today in Iqaluit High School, in Nunavut High School, in Baker Lake High School, Hogluktuk High School, Cambridge Bay High School. First Nations High School in Manitoba, Winnipeg High School in Manitoba. So it's important that we continue this journey so that we have a healing of people, of all Canadians. We should go to every school in Canada and teach about Inuit history. We should go to every school in Canada and talk about healing journey and reconciliation of Aboriginal people, Inuit of Canada, in every classroom in Canada. Extend that to Rome. By the way, I went to Rome about 3 or 4 years ago with Phil Fontaine, Mary Simon, and other people to hear the statement by the Pope Benedict on statement of reconciliation. To me, that was inadequate. But I think this Pope Francis can make a big move to go ahead and move that official apology to the Aboriginal people of Canada by Pope Francis. This guy is pretty amazing to me. As much, well, you know, Barack Obama is pretty amazing too, but Stephen Harper is not. I'm going to go just to my notes, and I'm going to say what I wanted to say in the end. We need wrong glasses. No, I got the other eye here. There. It's called I'm getting older, but getting better. Hey, look, we need to work together. And by working together, I believe we can bring about results which will ensure a better tomorrow for many people in Nunavut, particularly our children. We feel for others. We have actively hold to our values of connectedness and empathy. We would never want to see others in the future to be overwhelmed, intimidated, devalued, isolated, or abused in any way. Never, never again. Out of great pain, there are lessons for all of us. Out of our suffering, there comes insight, compassion for others, and a deep resolve to move forward, treating other people with greater awareness and kindness. Out of our frustration and isolation comes a desire to acknowledge and confront, rather than avoid what is obvious and continuing to suffer in silence. Out of a deeply held Inuit belief in survival and always moving forward comes a genuine wish to reach out and to help each other progress. Out of marginalizing experience comes a profound need to connect with others, to reaffirm our own identity while respecting diversity. Out of pain comes sensitivity to others who have suffered. So that gives you an idea of what we have been trying to do. We got to do it together no matter where we are. We have to do it together because it's the right thing to do. It's not us that we're talking about so much, but it's our children and their children that we are talking about, so that they have a better tomorrow. They have an opportunity that we make, an opportunity that is better for them than it is ours. So thank you very much for this. Thank you for the invitation. And I want to just tell you one last thing before I finish. And by the way, we are in this, we were so far away. If you have not seen it, it's there. About September 1994, a fellow writes a letter to the editor of Inuit News. And he said, whatever happened to the Eskimos? I said, well, I thought, well, we have always called ourselves Inuit, which means people. Somebody else called us Eskimo, which can be downright offending to some Inuit. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to get into an argument with the guy from Toronto. And I thought, I wrote a letter to the editor of Inuit News, and I said, dear editor, in regard to so-and-so's letter to the editor who said, whatever happened to the Eskimos? I said, they have all moved to Edmonton, and they've been playing football ever since. Thank you. Wow.